A young billionaire comes across four poor girls crying on the sidewalk. He asks, "Why are you crying?" They look at him and say, "Nobody wants us." Shocked, he decides to take them home. Years later, what they do will break his heart. The digital clock on the Bentley's dashboard read 11:47 p.m. Owen loosened his black tie slightly as his driver maneuvered through the upscale streets of New York. A light rain had begun to fall, and droplets slid down the tinted window, distorting the city lights. "Richard, let's take a different route today," Owen said, his low voice breaking the silence inside the car. "I'm tired of seeing the same buildings." The driver nodded and turned right at the next corner, steering away from the usual route. Owen closed his eyes for a moment. The charity event had been like all the others: forced smiles, superficial conversations, and many, many photos. Tomorrow's magazines would plaster his name once again. Owen Hayes, 29, the young billionaire, donates millions to children in need. The irony wasn't lost on him. He donated millions to children he would never meet, then returned to a mansion where the only sound was that of his own footsteps. "Sir, are you all right?" Richard asked, looking into the rearview mirror. Owen opened his eyes. "Yes, just thinking." The rain intensified and Richard slowed down. They were in a residential area Owen didn't immediately recognize. Modest but well-kept homes lined both sides of the street, a middle-class neighborhood without the excessive shine of the financial district. That was when he saw it. Beneath the yellowish glow of a street lamp, four small figures were huddled on the sidewalk. Even with the rain coming down, they stayed there, unmoving. "Richard, stop the car." "Sir, stop the car now." The Bentley eased smoothly to the curb. Owen didn't wait for Richard to open his door. He got out quickly, ignoring the rain that began soaking his $12,000 suit. As he approached, he saw that they were children. Four small girls, drenched and shivering. The oldest couldn't have been more than 6, and the youngest looked about 4. They were sitting together, hugging each other, crying silently. "Hello?" Owen said, bending down to their level. "Are you lost?" The girls pulled in closer to one another, like frightened birds. The oldest drew the others closer still. "I'm not going to hurt you," he continued, his voice gentler now. "It's raining. You'll get sick." "Where are your parents?" The oldest girl looked at him, her big dark eyes filled with fear and something else, resignation. A child so small shouldn't know that feeling. "I can help you get home," Owen insisted, noticing their clothes were not just wet, but also dirty and worn. It was the youngest who finally spoke, her voice as tiny as she was. "Nobody wants us." 3 words. Simple, direct, and devastating. Owen felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. The air left his lungs, and for a moment, he couldn't breathe. That phrase, spoken by a child so young, carried a universe of pain he knew all too well. Nobody wants us. Images of his own childhood flooded his mind. A boy sitting alone in a cold waiting room, temporary homes, faces that came and went. The word returned, whispered when they thought he couldn't hear. "Richard," Owen called, without taking his eyes off the girls. "Bring the blankets from the trunk." The driver, confused but efficient, brought the blankets Owen always kept in the car for emergencies. "Are you cold?" Owen asked, offering them the blankets. "They're soft." The youngest reached out a hesitant hand and touched the fabric. "It's soft," she agreed, glancing at the oldest, silently asking for permission. The oldest studied Owen with an intensity that didn't match her size. She didn't trust him. And why should she? But it was raining. Her sisters were wet and cold, and this man was offering dry blankets. She gave a small nod, and the 4 girls accepted the blankets, wrapping themselves in them. "My name is Owen," he said. "What are your names?" Silence. Then, the oldest spoke, her voice surprisingly steady. "I'm Sophie. These are my sisters, Luma, Bella, and Issa." They were so little, so fragile, sitting there in the rain, with no one to protect them. "Are you hungry?" Owen asked. 4 pairs of eyes lit up for a brief moment before distrust returned. That's when Owen did something he hadn't planned, something he hadn't analyzed with the usual precision of a man who built an empire by calculating every move. Do you want to come with me? I have food at home and warm beds. At least until we figure out where you should be. The words came out before he could think of the legal implications, the complications, the absurdity of the situation. A single billionaire inviting 4 unknown children to his house in the middle of the night. But something in those words, "nobody wants us," had broken a barrier inside him. The girls looked at each other, a silent conversation passing among them. It was Sophie who made the decision again. "Can we stay together?" "Of course," Owen answered immediately. "And if we don't like it, can we leave?" Owen swallowed hard. "Yes, you're not prisoners." Sophie stood, still holding Isa's hand, the youngest. "Then let's go." Richard, who had been watching everything with growing concern, opened the car door. The girls hesitated at the sight of the luxurious vehicle. "It's safe," Owen assured them. "Richard has been my driver for years." One by one, the girls climbed into the Bentley, crowding into the back seat, still wrapped in the blankets. The car slid smoothly through the rain as Owen tried to process what he'd just done. There had to be laws against this, surely. He should have called the police or social services. But something in the look on those girls' faces, something that mirrored his own past, drove him. "Sir," Richard murmured, low enough for only Owen to hear, "I must remind you this is—" "I know, Richard," Owen interrupted. "We'll deal with everything legally tomorrow. Right now, they need somewhere safe." The rest of the drive passed in silence. The girls watched the city go by through the window, wide-eyed at the lights and the towering buildings as they approached the exclusive neighborhood where Owen lived. When the car stopped in front of the wrought-iron gates, Owen saw Bella, the second youngest, shrink back. "Is this where you live?" Luma asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes," Owen replied, trying to imagine what his home must look like through their eyes. The white stone mansion, with its imposing columns and perfectly trimmed gardens, must have seemed intimidating to such small children. The gates opened automatically, and the car followed the circular driveway, stopping in front of the main entrance. "We're here," Owen announced, trying to sound casual, as though bringing 4 unknown children home was something he did every day. The mansion was silent and dark when they entered, only security lights illuminating the way. Owen switched on the lights in the massive entrance hall, revealing marble floors, curved staircases, and valuable works of art. "Wow," Bella murmured, momentarily forgetting her fear. "You must be hungry," Owen said, guiding them to the kitchen. It was a clinical space, all stainless steel and white marble, a kitchen designed for a professional chef, not a family. The girls sat hesitantly on the tall stools around the central island, still wrapped in the blankets, while Owen opened the fridge. He rarely ventured inside. His personal chef usually handled all meals. "We have, He scanned the contents, realizing he had no idea what small children ate. "Sandwiches? I can make sandwiches." The girls nodded, watching his every move with cautious attention. Owen started to make simple sandwiches with what he found: bread, cheese, ham. His hands, used to signing multi-million-dollar contracts, now fumbled with the basic task of spreading mayonnaise. "Do you like juice?" he asked, finding a carton of orange juice in the fridge. 4 heads bobbed affirmatively. As they ate in silence, Owen realized just how hungry they were. They devoured the sandwiches quickly, their eyes already looking for more. "I can make more," he offered, and they eagerly accepted. While preparing the second round of sandwiches, Owen studied the girls. Now, under the bright kitchen lights, he could see their features more clearly. They all had dark hair and big eyes, but each was distinct. Sophie, the oldest, had a maternal way about her, despite being so young. Luma was quiet, her eyes observing everything with curiosity. Bela had a delicate face that suited her name, with a few freckles across her nose. Isa, the youngest, had round cheeks and eyes too big for her little face. After eating, exhaustion began to overtake them. Isa yawned, rubbing her eyes with tiny fists. "You need a warm bath and dry clothes," Owen said, suddenly aware he had no children's clothing in the house. "For now, I can lend you some of my t-shirts to sleep in. Tomorrow, we'll buy new clothes." He led them down the wide hallway to the guest wing, where 4 adjacent rooms were located. "Each of you can have your own room," he explained, opening the doors to show them the elegant, minimalist spaces. The girls stayed clustered, eyeing the rooms uneasily. "Can't we stay together?" Sophie asked, squeezing Issa's hand. "Of course," Owen replied quickly. "So you can all stay in the same room if you'd like." They chose the largest room, with a king-size bed and a view of the back garden. Owen showed them the attached bathroom, explaining how to use the shower and leaving soft towels for each of them. "I'll go get you t-shirts to use as pajamas," he said, stepping out to give them privacy. When he returned with folded shirts, he found all 4 seated on the edge of the huge bed, still wrapped in the blankets, untouched. "You haven't taken a bath?" he asked, confused. "We don't know how that shower works," Luma explained. "It has too many buttons." Owen realized his mistake. The guest bathroom had a digital shower system with multiple settings. "I'll show you," he offered, stepping into the bathroom and adjusting the temperature and water pressure. One by one, the girls bathed, while Owen waited outside. He heard occasional giggles as they discovered the side jets or the colored lights that could be switched on. Once they were all clean and dressed in his oversized t-shirts, which looked more like dresses on them, Owen led them back to the room. "You can sleep here," he said, helping them climb onto the high bed. "There are extra blankets in the closet if you get cold." The girls huddled in the center of the bed, like puppies seeking warmth, instead of spreading out across the ample space. "Thank you," Sophie said formally, as though reciting something she'd learned. "You're welcome," Owen replied, feeling oddly awkward. "If you need anything during the night, my room is at the end of the hall on the right." He hesitated at the door, watching the 4 little figures on the massive bed. Something about that image, lost children in a space far too large, resonated deeply within him. "Good night," he finally said, switching off the main light and leaving only the bedside lamp on. "Good night, Mr. Owen," they answered in unison. Owen closed the door and walked down the silent hallway to his own room. The mansion, always so quiet, now held a different kind of silence, a watchful one, as though the very air knew something had changed. In his room, Owen sat on the edge of the bed, trying to process the night's events. There were 4 children sleeping in his house. 4 children he'd found on the street. 4 children who said, "Nobody wants us." He picked up his phone, thinking of calling his lawyer, but stopped. What would he say? "Hey, Jeff, I picked up 4 kids off the street and brought them home. Is that legal?" He knew it wasn't. Tomorrow he'd straighten everything out. He'd call social services, explain the situation, do what was right. But as he got ready for bed, part of him already knew that what was right might not be so clear after all. In the middle of the night, Owen woke to a sound he had never heard in his house, the sound of little footsteps in the hallway, followed by muffled crying. He got up quickly and opened the door. In the dark corridor, 4 small figures stood huddled, looking lost. "We're scared," Bella said, her voice trembling. "The room is too big and dark." Owen felt a tug in his chest. "Do you want a nightlight?" They nodded silently. "Come on," he said, guiding them back to the room. He found a small lamp and plugged it in near the bed. "Is that better?" "A little," Sophie replied, but none of them made a move to get back into bed. "What else can I do?" Owen asked, genuinely wanting to help. Issa, the youngest, looked at him with wide eyes and said with painful honesty, "In the other place, we all slept in a little room together. Here it's so big. Feels like we'll get lost." Owen glanced around the spacious room, suddenly seeing it through their eyes. What was luxury to him was an intimidating vastness to them. "Wait here," he said, stepping out quickly. Minutes later, he returned with extra pillows and blankets. In the middle of the room, he began piling them up, creating a kind of nest on the floor. "How about this?" he asked. "It's small and cozy." The girls looked curiously at the makeshift construction. "Like a fort?" Luma asked, a hint of excitement in her voice for the first time. "Exactly like a fort," Owen confirmed, adjusting the pillows to form a protective barrier around the space. One by one, the girls entered the blanket nest, settling together in the smaller, closer space, their tiny bodies visibly relaxed, comforted by each other's proximity. Better? Owen asked. 4 sleepy heads nodded. Good night, then, he said, stepping back toward the door. Mr. Owen? Issa's voice stopped him. Can you stay until we fall asleep? Owen paused, surprised by the request. Sure, he answered after a moment, sitting down on the floor near the blanket fort. Within minutes, their breathing turned deep and even. As they slept, the worried lines on their faces eased, and they finally looked what they truly were, just children. Owen remained on the floor, watching them sleep, fully aware that something irreversible had happened on that rainy night. That simple, devastating statement, "Nobody wants us," had found a deep echo inside him. And without planning, without calculating risks or consequences, he'd responded in the only way his once broken heart could. I do. 3 days after bringing the girls home, Owen realized he needed help. The 4 little ones barely left the guest room, still sleeping in the blanket fort he had improvised. They ate little, spoke even less, and always stuck together, as if afraid someone might separate them at any moment. His personal assistant, Marcus, had found Helena Garcia, a caregiver with over 20 years of experience. When Owen interviewed her, something about the natural calm of the middle-aged woman convinced him. The children need to feel safe before anything else, Helena explained in her interview, her brown eyes radiating a serenity Owen envied. Trust comes first, then the rest. He hired her on the spot. On Helena's first morning at the mansion, Owen accompanied her to the girls' room. They were still asleep, bundled together like puppies. They sleep like this every night, Helena asked quietly. Owen nodded. I tried putting them in the bed, but they always end up back on the floor together. Helena observed the scene for a moment. They're protecting each other. It's common in children who've been through tough times. When the girls woke and saw the stranger, their faces instantly closed off. Sophie, the oldest, placed herself in front of the other 3. Hello, Helena greeted, keeping her distance. My name is Helena. I came to help you and Mr. Owen. No response. She'll take care of you during the day, Owen explained, feeling the tension in the air. Helena knows how to make delicious pancakes. Do you like pancakes? Issa, the youngest, widened her eyes but quickly hid her interest when Sophie looked at her. I can make pancakes for breakfast, Helena offered, with strawberries and honey, if you'd like. Bela's stomach rumbled audibly, breaking some of the tension. Luma stifled a giggle. I guess that's a yes, Owen concluded, exchanging a knowing glance with Helena. In the kitchen, the girls sat together on one side of the large island, silently watching Helena as she prepared the batter. Owen hovered nearby, unsure of his role in this new dynamic. Mr. Owen, could you please get the strawberries from the fridge? Helena asked, naturally including him in the task. He obeyed, oddly relieved to have something to do. As he placed the bowl of strawberries on the counter, Helena smiled. Now we need to wash them. Would anyone like to help? Bella, the second youngest, eyed the bright red strawberries with obvious curiosity. After a brief hesitation, she timidly raised her hand. I can help, she said, her voice almost a whisper. Great, Helena exclaimed, without overdoing the enthusiasm. We'll put them in this strainer and wash them together. Owen watched, surprised, as Bella slid off the tall stool and walked hesitantly toward Helena. The caregiver brought over a small step stool, positioning it by the sink so the child could reach the faucet. Over the following days, Owen followed Helena's advice and didn't force closeness. He stayed present, but not intrusive. He watched how Helena slowly earned the girls' trust with small, consistent gestures. Children who've experienced trauma need predictability, Helena explained to Owen one night after the girls were asleep. I'm establishing routines. That helps create security. Owen nodded, making mental notes. He, who had built an empire based on data and strategies, was now studying something entirely different, how to make 4 small children trust him. On the afternoon of the 7th day, Owen passed by the living room and saw Helena reading a story to the girls. They were sitting on the rug around her, transfixed by the bright illustrations in the book. Mr. Owen, would you like to finish the story? Helena offered when she saw him. I need to prepare a snack. 4 pairs of eyes turned to him, cautious but no longer frightened. Owen felt a lump in his throat. It was the first time they didn't look terrified in his presence. "Sure," he said, taking the spot Helena vacated. He took the book carefully, as if it were a valuable object. It was a story about forest animals forming an improvised family. The irony wasn't lost on him. The little hedgehog looked at his new friends. Owen began to read from where Helena had stopped, and realized it didn't matter that they didn't look alike. What mattered was that they cared for one another. His voice, usually used to commanding boardrooms, now adjusted to narrate a children's story. He changed tone for each character, making different voices that drew a small smile from Issa. When the book ended, there was a moment of silence. "You do funny voices," Luma commented at last. Owen smiled, surprised by the remark. "Really? I've never done that before." "You never read stories?" Bella asked, her little face puzzled. "Not to children," he admitted honestly. "So who do you read to then?" Sophie asked. Owen thought for a moment. "I guess just to adults in meetings, and those aren't fun stories like this." "That's sad," Issa declared with the brutal honesty of very young children. Owen couldn't help but laugh. "Yeah, I guess it is." That small interaction opened a door. In the following nights, Owen joined the bedtime story routine. The girls still slept together in the blanket fort, but now they let him sit on the edge to read. Helena, observing the change, smiled approvingly. "You're doing well," she commented one night, as Owen walked her to the door. "Keep it up." "What exactly am I doing right?" he asked, genuinely curious. "You're being consistent," she replied, "and authentic. Children sense falsehood faster than adults." In the second week, Owen cancelled an important business trip to remain with the girls. His assistant was perplexed, but Owen was determined. "Postpone the meeting," he instructed over the phone. "Tell them I had a family emergency." The word family slipped out naturally, without him noticing its implication. With each passing day, small breakthroughs happened. Luma, the quiet one, became interested in the grand piano in the sitting room. Owen found her timidly pressing a few keys. "Would you like to learn?" he asked, keeping his distance so as not to startle her. She nodded, her eyes shining. "I can show you some notes," he offered, recalling lessons he'd had as a child. He sat at the piano, leaving space for her. After a moment of hesitation, Luma got on the bench beside him. He positioned her little fingers on the keys. "These are the notes de Pafori mi Defe Sol," he explained, pressing each key gently. Luma repeated the movement, concentrated. A slight smile appeared when she managed to replicate the sequence correctly. Sophie, ever watchful of her sisters, started asking practical questions about the house, about where things were kept, about the rules. Owen realized that, even so young, she had taken on the caretaker role. "You don't have to worry about all of that," he told her gently. "You're still a child, Sophie." She looked at him with eyes far too wise for her age. "Someone has to take care of them." "There are more people to help now," Owen replied. "Helena and I are here." Something in the girl's face relaxed slightly. One afternoon, Owen found Issa, the youngest, wandering alone in the hallway. The first time one of them separated from the group. She was carrying a tattered doll, a worn-out toy they had brought with them. "Hi, Issa," he greeted, crouching to her level. "Where are your sisters?" "They're sleeping," she replied, "but Rosie isn't sleepy." "Rosie is your doll?" Owen asked. Issa nodded, hugging the doll closer. "She's hungry." Owen considered his options. It was the first time one of the girls had sought him out. "Do you want us to make a snack for Rosie in the kitchen?" Issa's eyes lit up. "She likes cookies." "What a coincidence," Owen replied with seriousness. "So do I." In the kitchen, he helped Issa onto the high stool and placed some cookies on a plate. The little one, very seriously, pretended to feed the doll. "Rosie says thank you," she announced formally. "You're welcome, Rosie," Owen answered, playing along. Issa studied him for a moment. "You know she's not real, right?" Owen smiled. "Yes, but it's fun to pretend sometimes." Issa nodded, as though he had passed some test. "The other dolls are hungry too." "Do they have names?" "Yes. Sophie's doll is Luna, Luma's doll is Starry, and Bela's is Blossom." Owen memorized each name, recognizing how important they were. We can bring cookies for all of them." In the days that followed, he made an effort to call each doll by its correct name, noticing the surprised smiles on the girls' faces when he remembered. They were small details, but they made a difference. Meals, once silent and tense, began to include small bursts of conversation. The girls still ate sparingly. "It takes time for the body to understand there will be regular meals," Helena explained, but they no longer hid food in their pockets for later. Helena also prepared Owen for the occasional tantrums. "It's normal," she reassured him after Bela had a crying fit because her sock felt weird. Young children have limited capacity to process emotions, and they've been through a lot. One morning, Owen was making breakfast while the girls took their usual seats at the table. Helena had the day off. He squeezed lemons to make fresh juice. "Want to try?" he offered, pouring small amounts into cups. Bela was the first to sip. Her entire face contorted in an exaggerated grimace, eyes squinted and lips pursed from the lemon sourness. Owen couldn't help it. A short, unexpected laugh escaped him. The four girls froze, staring at him in surprise. Owen realized it was the first time he'd laughed in front of them. The realization hit him. It was the first time he'd laughed spontaneously in how long? Years. Bela, after a moment of shock, made another face, even more exaggerated. Owen laughed again, more freely this time. Soon they were all making silly faces, trying to outdo each other, and the kitchen, usually so silent and pristine, echoed with laughter. Owen felt something strange in his cheeks. The muscles ached from smiling, unaccustomed to the exercise. That afternoon, he found Bela sitting at the dining room table with paper and crayons spread out before her. She was drawing intently, her tongue sticking out in deep concentration. "Can I see what you're drawing?" he asked, approaching slowly. Bela nodded, sliding the paper toward him. It was a typical children's drawing, stick figures with big heads and simple expressions. But what caught Owen's attention was the composition. 5 figures holding hands, 4 small, 1 larger. "It's really nice," he said, his voice slightly choked. "Who are they?" Bela pointed to each figure as she explained, "That's Sophie, that's Luma, that's me, that's Isa." She paused, looking at him with a mixture of hesitation and hope. "And that's you." Owen felt something tighten in his chest. "Me?" Bela nodded. "We're all holding hands." "I see," was all he managed to say. "Can I tape it to the fridge?" she asked. Helena said families tape drawings on the fridge. The word families hit Owen hard. He swallowed. "Of course you can," he finally answered. He followed her to the kitchen and helped her stick the drawing on the refrigerator with magnets. When the paper was in place, colorful and vibrant against the stainless steel, Bela smiled proudly. "Now it looks like a real home," she declared, before running off to show her sisters. Owen remained in the kitchen, gazing at the drawing. 5 figures holding hands under a big yellow sun. The image triggered a memory so strong it nearly took his breath away. Himself at 6 years old, sitting at a table in the foster center, drawing. Stick figures, a man, a woman, a boy, a family that didn't exist, a family that would never come for him. The caregiver at the foster center had been kind. She'd pinned up the drawing, but Owen saw the pity in her eyes. That picture stayed up for weeks, a constant reminder of his deepest desire and greatest impossibility. Now, 30 years later, another child had drawn a family and included him in it. The simplicity of the gesture, the hope in those childlike strokes, created a crack in the armor he'd built around his heart over the years. He touched the drawing gently, as though it was something precious and fragile. In that moment, he realized he wasn't just giving shelter to 4 little girls. They were also filling a void inside him he hadn't known could be filled. "Owen!" Isa's excited voice snapped him out of his thoughts. She ran toward him, followed by the other 3. "Bela said you let her put the drawing on the fridge." He smiled, noticing how they no longer called him Mr. "Yes, and it's perfect there," he replied. "Can I draw something for the fridge too?" Luma asked timidly. "Of course. All your drawings can go on the fridge." Sophie, always the most serious and cautious, studied him for a moment. "Why are your eyes wet?" she asked. Owen hadn't noticed the moisture in his eyes. "Sometimes we get emotional when we're happy," he explained. "You're happy with us here?" Issa asked, her large eyes full of hope. Owen knelt down to their level. "Very happy," he answered sincerely. For the first time since he had brought them home, Issa took a step forward and hugged him spontaneously. A quick, shy hug, but a hug nonetheless. "We're happy too," she whispered before pulling away. That night, as he read them their bedtime story, Owen noticed the difference. The girls still slept together in their makeshift nest of blankets, but now they let him sit closer. Issa even rested her head on his arm as he turned the pages. When he finished reading and they were all nearly asleep, he heard Bella's sleepy voice. "Good night, Owen." "Good night, Bella," he replied, warmth flooding his chest. In the hallway on his way to his own room, Owen stopped to look at the drawing on the fridge again. 5 figures holding hands under a big yellow sun. Small signs of life had begun to bloom, not just from the children starting to feel safe, but inside him as well. Somewhere deep down, a seed of genuine affection was taking root, cracking through years of emotional concrete. For the first time in a very long while, Owen slept without the weight of loneliness. The mansion's doorbell rang on a Tuesday at 10:15 a.m. Owen was in his makeshift office in the living room, working on his laptop while keeping an eye on the girls playing. They had puzzle pieces spread across the rug, and Helena was helping Issa fit a particularly tricky piece. Over the past few weeks, the children had started to separate a bit more, gaining the confidence to explore different parts of the house, though never straying too far from one another. The doorbell broke the morning's peace. The 4 girls instantly lifted their heads, like small deer alerted by the slightest noise in the forest. In seconds, they regrouped, Sophie instinctively placing herself in front of the others. "I'll get it," Helena said, standing up. "No, let me," Owen interrupted, closing the laptop. "Stay with them." As he walked to the door, Owen glanced out the side window and saw an official-looking car parked out front. His stomach twisted. Somehow, he knew this moment was coming. He took a deep breath and opened the door. "Good morning," said a woman in a grey suit, her expression serious, a file in her hand. "Mr. Owen Hayes?" "Yes, that's me," she extended a card. "Diane Foster, social worker with Child Protective Services. I need to speak with you about the 4 children in your custody." The hesitation before custody did not go unnoticed. "Of course," Owen replied, forcing his voice to remain steady. "Please, come in." He led her to his main office, away from where the girls were. From the corner of his eye, he saw Helena guiding them upstairs, as if to shield them. "Mr. Hayes," Diane began, cutting to the chase. "About 5 weeks ago, you found 4 unaccompanied minors and brought them to your residence without notifying the authorities, correct?" Owen felt his heart race. "Yes, I found them alone on a rainy night. They were cold, scared, hungry. My only thought was to secure their immediate safety." "And why didn't you contact CPS or the police the next morning?" Diane asked, her tone neutral but firm. The truth was too complicated. How to explain that with each passing day, the idea of handing the girls over to the system had grown more unbearable. That his lawyer was quietly working on legal steps for a possible adoption. "I consulted my lawyer about the proper legal procedures. The process is underway," he replied, choosing his words carefully. Diane opened her file and took out 4 photographs, placing them on the desk. "Do you recognize these children?" Owen looked at the official pictures, photos of the 4 girls with solemn, frightened expressions, the kind used for institutional documentation. "Yes, that's them. Sophia, Luma, Isabella, and Isadora Martinez," Diane read from a form. "Sisters, orphaned about 6 months ago after a car accident that took their parents. They were in temporary custody at the Sunshine Shelter when they disappeared." Owen felt a pang in his chest upon hearing the girls' full names and part of their story. During their weeks with him, he'd never pressed for details about their past. "They ran away," he asked, though he already suspected, apparently so. "Climbed out of a window in the middle of the night and vanished. There was an extensive search involving the police and volunteers." Diane looked at him intently. "Mr. Hayes, I understand your intentions may have been good, but what you did is, at minimum, a serious breach of protocol." What happens now? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. I need to assess the full situation, talk to the children, inspect the living conditions, review your status. The department will then make a decision based on that assessment. A decision about what? Exactly, Owen pressed, fear surging within him. Whether they can remain temporarily under your supervision while any custody request is processed, or whether they must return to the foster system until a final decision is made. Owen felt his blood turn cold. Return to the system means they'd likely go back to the Sunshine Shelter or a similar institution, depending on availability. Together, he asked, his voice nearly failing him. Diane's hesitation was enough of an answer. We do everything possible to keep siblings together, but it's not always feasible, especially with 4 children. The thought of them being separated was unbearable. Owen remembered how they clung to each other those first nights, as if their greatest fear was being torn apart. I need to speak with them now, Diane said, closing her file. Individually, if possible. Owen wanted to protest. The girls had only just begun to feel safe and now they'd be questioned by a stranger, but he knew any resistance would only make things worse. Of course, I'll call them. In the hallway, he found Helena waiting, worry etched on her face. She's from CPS, he explained quietly. She needs to talk to the girls. Individually. They're in the bedroom, Helena replied. Ever since they heard the doorbell, they've clustered together again, like at the start. They're scared. Owen. He climbed the stairs with heavy steps. In the bedroom, the 4 sat on the bed, no longer on the nest of blankets, but still huddled close as on the first day. Girls, he began, sitting on the edge of the bed. There's a lady here who needs to talk to you. A social worker. She just wants to make sure you're okay. Is she going to take us away? Sophie asked bluntly, her large dark eyes fixed on him. Owen felt a lump in his throat. He wanted to promise no, but he couldn't lie. I don't know, he answered honestly. I hope not. I'm doing everything I can so you can stay here. Why does she want to talk to us? Luma asked, her usually calm voice now trembling. It's her job to make sure children are safe and well cared for, Owen explained. You just have to answer her questions truthfully. Tell her what it's like living here. What if we don't want to talk to her? Bella asked, folding her arms. It's better if you do, Owen replied gently. I'll be nearby the whole time. Reluctantly, the girls went downstairs. Diane waited in the living room, wearing a professional smile. Hello, girls, she greeted. I'm Diane. Can we talk for a bit? When Diane asked to speak with them individually, Owen tried explaining that they felt safer together. But the social worker was firm. It's standard procedure. We need to ensure each child can speak freely without influence from the others. Owen watched helplessly as Sophie, the oldest, followed Diane into the office. Helena tried to distract the other 3 with a memory game, but no one was truly focused. The next 20 minutes felt endless. When Sophie finally returned, her little face was closed off and serious. She went straight to her sisters, avoiding Owen's gaze. One by one, all 4 girls had their private sessions with Diane. Each returned quieter than before. Issa, the youngest, came back in silent tears, running straight into Helena's arms. Well, Mr. Hayes, Diane said, returning to the living room after the last interview. I need to write up my full report. I'll be back in a few days with the department's decision. After she left, a heavy silence fell over the house. The girls disappeared upstairs, presumably back to the bedroom. Owen found them not on the bed, but back in their old nest of blankets on the floor, all huddled together like the first days. She asked a lot of questions, Sophie said when he entered. What kind of questions? Owen asked, sitting on the floor near them. If you're nice, if we eat well, if we go to school, Sophie listed. If we want to go back to the shelter. Owen felt a twinge. And what did you say? We said no, Bella exclaimed. We told her we want to stay with you. For a moment, Owen felt a surge of hope. But then he saw the fear on their faces, and the reality of the situation hit him hard. That night, just as he was about to drift off, he heard a sound he hadn't heard in weeks, the muffled sobs of one of the girls. He got up quickly and went to their room. Issa was sitting in the nest of blankets, silent tears streaming down her face. The other three were awake too, their eyes shining in the dim light. "A bad dream?" Owen asked softly, kneeling beside them. Isa nodded, clutching her worn-out doll to her chest. "She dreamed we had to leave," Sophie explained, hugging her youngest sister, "and that they were going to put us in different homes." The fear in her voice was palpable. Owen felt his own heart constrict. "I'm doing everything I can to stop that from happening," he promised. Everything. He stayed there, telling stories until they all fell asleep again. When he returned to his own room, the sun was already beginning to rise. In the days that followed, he noticed alarming changes in the girl's behavior. It was as if the social worker's visit had undone weeks of progress in a matter of hours. Isa, who had started to speak more and weave elaborate tales about her doll Nindis, now barely said a word. She mostly communicated with nods and gestures, like in the early days. "It's a stress response," Helena explained to Owen as they watched Isa quietly play with Rosie. "She's protecting herself by reverting to a state where she feels safer." Sophie, always the most responsible, became even more vigilant with her sisters. She wouldn't leave their side for an instant, even when Helena encouraged separate activities. One morning, as the others still slept, Helena discreetly called Owen to the room. "She's having nighttime accidents," Helena said softly, showing the wet sheet she was trying to change without the others noticing. "It's common in extreme stress. Regression." Owen nodded, remembering his own childhood in the foster system. How many times had he wet the bed after being moved to a new home or hearing another promise broken? Luma, usually the calm and thoughtful one, started having angry outbursts, completely out of character. If she hit a wrong note on the piano, she'd pound the keys in frustration. If a puzzle piece didn't fit, she'd fling all the pieces off the table. Small actions, but they revealed the emotional storm within her. But the most concerning change was in Bella. The girl who had always shown so much enthusiasm at mealtime now refused to eat. She would sit at the table, stare at her plate, and just push her food around. "I'm not hungry," she'd say consistently, though her tiny body was starting to show signs of weight loss. "She's trying to gain control," Helena explained during a late-night conversation in the kitchen. When children feel they're losing control over the big things in life, they sometimes try to control what they can, and food is one of those things. Helena suggested strategies for each situation: patience with Isa, reassurance for Sophie, firm boundaries for Luma, and small victories for Bella. Owen followed each recommendation religiously, desperate to help them feel safe again. But on the 6th day after Diane's visit, during a particularly tough evening in which Luma had smashed a glass on purpose and Bella ate nothing at dinner, Owen felt his own fear and frustration mounting. After finally getting the girls to bed, he retreated to his office and collapsed in his chair. The fear of losing them was growing by the day. More than that, the fear they would be separated, that they would go through the same endless cycle he had experienced, the constant sense of rejection, of never belonging, of always being ready to leave. Owen opened his desk drawer and pulled out an old, faded photo. Himself at 8 years old, standing alone in front of one of the many foster homes he had passed through. His young face was serious, his eyes already bearing the weight of too many goodbyes. The memories he had long suppressed flooded back. The names, the faces, the excuses. "We're not prepared for a child this age. We wanted a baby. We're looking for someone more outgoing. And the worst of all, we'll try another child." Trial and error. As if kids were shoes you could return if they didn't fit perfectly. Looking at that old photo, Owen understood he was fighting not just for these 4 little girls sleeping upstairs. He was fighting against the system that had once made him feel disposable. Against the notion that children are just pieces to be moved around in a bureaucratic game. He was fighting for the boy in the photo too. His phone rang, breaking the silence. It was Jeff, his lawyer. "I got a preliminary hearing with Judge Foster next week," Jeff informed him. "He's known to be fair in custody cases. It'll just be an initial hearing, but it's our foot in the door." "What about the social worker? Will she submit her report before that?" "Probably. Listen, Owen, you need to understand something. Even with your resources and influence, this is going to be complicated. You're asking for custody of 4 children with no prior parenting experience, no blood relation to them. It's going to be tough. I don't care how tough it is, Owen answered, his voice resolute despite his exhaustion. They belong together, and I think they belong here too. After hanging up, Owen passed by the girls' room. The door was slightly ajar, and he saw them sleeping. Even in sleep, they stayed close and like baby animals seeking warmth. Sophie, the oldest, had a protective arm around Issa, the youngest. For the first time in his adult life, Owen felt tears burning his eyes, not just from the fear of losing them, but for all the nights he himself had longed for someone to fight this hard for him. The next morning, he found Bela sitting alone in the living room, looking at the drawing of the 5 figures holding hands that used to be on the fridge. The paper was crumpled, as though it had been thrown away and then retrieved. "Bella," he called softly, "is everything okay?" She lifted her eyes, and Owen saw the same lost look she'd had the night he found her in the rain. "This drawing is a lie," she said, her voice small but determined. "Why?" Owen asked, sitting beside her on the couch. "Because we're not a real family. The lady said we might have to leave." Owen felt something break inside his chest. "You know, Bella," he said, taking the crumpled drawing gently, "families are made here." He pointed to the heart. "Not on paper or in court, and in my heart, you 4 are already my family. But we might have to leave," Bella insisted. "I'm fighting so that doesn't happen," he replied. "Sometimes making a family official takes time. There are papers and rules." "And we could be separated," Bella finished, her voice trembling. "Like that book about the little bear who ends up alone." Owen swallowed hard. "I promise you one thing, no matter what happens, I'll never stop trying to keep you together, and you'll always have a place here. Always." Bella studied him for a long moment, as if deciding whether to believe him. "Promise you won't give up on us?" she finally asked. "I promise," Owen replied without hesitation. Then, to his surprise, Bella reached out and took his hand. It was the first time she initiated physical contact. "Then it's not a lie yet," she decided, her small chin lifting in determination. In that instant, in the face of a 5-year-old child, Owen saw the same strength he himself had needed to survive the system. And he knew with a certainty he'd never felt before that this was a fight he could not lose. The next morning, he called his lawyer. "Jeff, I want you to dig up everything about the accident that killed their parents. Why there are no relatives claiming them. The complete history of the Sunshine Shelter, everything. And I want to file the official adoption request today. For all 4. Owen, we've been over this. The normal process can take months, sometimes years." "We don't have months," Owen interrupted, his voice carrying a newfound determination. "I'm fighting my own ghosts here, Jeff, and I won't let these kids go through the same hell I did." There was a brief silence on the line. "All right," Jeff finally replied. "We'll show the judge and that social worker exactly why you're the best father these girls could have." Owen hung up, looking at the old photo he'd left on the desk, the lonely boy he once was. For him, for Sophie, for Luma, for Bella, for Issa, and for all children lost in the system. This was a battle he had to win. Helena found him like that, staring at the photo. Without a word, she set a cup of coffee on the desk. "They'll get through this," she said simply. "And so will you." Owen nodded, putting the photo away. Upstairs, he heard small bare feet running down the hallway and childish voices exchanging morning whispers. The house was coming to life again, fragile but persistent, like the children who now lived there. Diane's visit had shaken the world they were starting to build, but it hadn't destroyed it completely. Hope remained, as fragile as the crumpled drawing of 5 figures holding hands. 3 days after the preliminary hearing with the judge, Owen woke up with an idea. The tension of the last few weeks had worn everyone down, especially the girls. The judge had granted temporary permission for them to stay under Owen's roof while the adoption process went on. A small victory that brought immediate relief but didn't erase their lingering anxiety. He needed to do something to help them just be children again, even if only for a day. "Let's have a picnic today," he announced at breakfast. 4 pairs of eyes turned to him with expressions ranging from surprise to skepticism. "What's a picnic?" Issa asked, breaking the silence she'd largely maintained since the social worker's visit. "It's when we eat outside, on a blanket, on the grass," Owen explained. With yummy food, games, fun. A day just for us. In the yard? Bella asked, showing genuine interest in food for the first time in weeks. Yes. In that corner near the trees, where the morning sun comes in and there's shade in the afternoon. Helena, watching from the kitchen, smiled encouragingly. She'd suggested something similar days ago. The kids needed a day of normalcy, simple joy, free from the constant shadow of fear. Can I bring Rosie? Issa asked, referring to her inseparable doll. Of course, all the dolls are invited, Owen replied. A faint smile flickered across Sophie's face, the first time in days. Can we help make the sandwiches? That's the plan. We'll prepare everything together. The morning became a whirlwind of activity. In the kitchen, each girl had a task. Sophie and the oldest helped cut the sandwiches into perfect triangles. Luma arranged the fruit on a colorful platter. Bela, who had been refusing to eat, surprisingly brightened up at decorating cookies with frosting. Lysa, the youngest, was in charge of the napkins, folding them into uneven shapes she insisted were special butterflies. Helena prepared a wicker basket she found in the basement, lining it with a red and white checkered cloth. Every picnic needs a proper basket, she explained, winking at Owen. By noon, everything was ready. Owen carried the basket and a big blanket, while the girls brought their dolls and some toys. Helena, sensing this moment needed to be just theirs, offered an excuse not to join. I need to organize some things inside. Have fun. The mansion's garden was expansive and well kept. Owen chose a spot under a large oak tree, where the grass was soft and the sunlight filtered gently through the leaves. He spread out the blanket and helped the girls set up their camp, as Bella decided to call it. The dolls go in the middle, Issa instructed solemnly, so they won't be scared. Owen complied, suppressing a smile. It was the longest sentence Issa had spoken in days. When everything was arranged, they sat in a circle, girls and their dolls on one side, Owen on the other. He poured the juice and handed out the sandwiches. Can we make a toast? He suggested, lifting his plastic cup. To what? Luma asked, imitating him hesitantly. Owen thought for a moment. To our day. To being together. To not having nosy people asking questions, Bella added, surprising everyone with her bluntness. They laughed and clinked cups. To Owen's surprise, Bella ate half a sandwich, the first substantial meal she'd had in weeks. Sophie, always watching over her sisters, noticed and exchanged a knowing look with Owen, but wisely said nothing. After the meal, Owen pulled a surprise from the basket, a colorful frisbee. Anyone know how to play? No one did, so he taught them. At first, they missed more than they caught, which led to laughter when the frisbee landed in random spots. Luma nearly knocked over an expensive vase, and they all froze for a second before bursting into nervous giggles when Owen pretended to faint in shock. That collective laughter, the first in weeks, seemed to break something in the air. Suddenly, the girls were sprinting around the yard, chasing the frisbee, shouting directions to each other, their high-pitched voices echoing off the once-quiet mansion walls. Owen stood back on the blanket, a lump in his throat. It was as if a filter had been removed, and he could finally see the children they really were, lively, loud, and full of energy, without the constant layer of fear. Sophie, usually so serious and in control, was now spinning with her arms outstretched, her hair flying around her. Luma, the quiet one, led a sort of disorganized march, singing a made-up song. Bela ran barefoot in the grass, her little feet trampling daisies without remorse, and Issa, the smallest, hopped in imaginary puddles, giggling at her own make-believe game. When they finally tired out, they returned to the blanket one by one, cheeks flushed, breathing heavily. Owen passed around fruit and cookies, which vanished in seconds. Can we do this every day? Issa asked, lying on her back watching the clouds. Not every day, Owen answered, but we can do it again, for sure. That cloud looks like a rabbit, Bela commented, pointing to the sky. Soon, they were all lying down, finding shapes in the clouds, dragons, castles, bears, cars, as the sky transformed under their imaginations. The afternoon passed peacefully. Issa eventually dozed off on the blanket, worn out from playing. Bella and Sophie started a contest to see who could pick more yellow flowers. Luma moved closer to Owen timidly and, to his surprise, rested her head on his lap. He froze for a moment, afraid of breaking the spontaneous gesture of trust. Gently, he began to stroke her dark hair. She closed her eyes, visibly relaxing. "You know what?" Luma said quietly after a few minutes, her voice almost a whisper. "What?" Owen asked in the same low tone. "You smell like home." 3 simple words. But for Owen, it was as though the whole world stopped for an instant. A surge of overwhelming emotion filled him, and he had to muster all his strength not to cry on the spot. "Really?" he managed, his voice hoarse. Luma nodded sleepily, not opening her eyes. Smells safe." Owen continued gently stroking her hair, his heart pounding in an odd, painful and wonderful rhythm at the same time. He looked around, at Issa asleep nearby, at Sophie and Bella running around the lawn, at Luma trusting him enough to lay her head on him, and a crystal-clear certainty formed inside him. This was the most important moment of his life. It wasn't just responsibility he felt now, not just protection or care. It was something deeper, more visceral, more complete, something he never thought himself capable of. He felt like a father, not a temporary guardian, not a benefactor, not an adult trying to do the right thing. A father, with all the fear, all the joy, all the uncertainty, and all the unconditional love that entails. As the sun began to set, bathing the garden in a golden light, Owen knew that no matter how long and hard the legal battle ahead, these 4 girls were already his daughters, and he would do anything so they could have many more days like this, days in which they were simply children, safe, loved, belonging somewhere, belonging to someone. Autumn had arrived in full force. Golden and red leaves covered the yard where, days earlier, they had held the picnic. Night fell earlier now, and the air carried a chill foreshadowing winter. Owen was in his office, reviewing documents Jeff had sent earlier. The adoption process was slowly moving forward, with more hearings scheduled and more evaluations pending. But each hurdle cleared made the possibility of an official family feel more real. Outside, the wind began to howl, rattling the windows. The forecast had warned of a major storm, and the dark clouds gathering throughout the day promised a wild night. Helena had already gone home after putting the girls to bed. They now had individual rooms decorated to each one's taste, though Owen often found them sleeping together in Sophie's room on nights like this. The first rumble of thunder sounded in the distance, a low growl that made Owen look up from the documents. Before he could return to his reading, another closer thunderclap rattled the windows. 3 seconds later, the lights flickered once or twice and then went out completely. The mansion plunged into total darkness. "Wonderful," Owen muttered, turning on his phone's flashlight. He knew where the candles and emergency lanterns were stored, but first, he had to check on the girls. As he climbed the stairs in the dim light, he heard a sharp scream from upstairs, followed by sobs. He sprinted, taking the steps 2 at a time. In the hallway, he found 4 small silhouettes huddled together, illuminated only by the faint glow of the battery-powered nightlights in the outlets. Sophie held a unicorn lamp, trying to comfort Issa, who was crying openly. "It's okay," Owen said, coming closer. "It's just a power outage because of the storm." "When will it come back?" Luma asked, her voice shaking slightly. "Maybe in a few hours, maybe not until tomorrow," he answered honestly. Another thunderclap, louder than the ones before, shook the house. Issa let out another shriek, and even Bela, usually the second bravest after Sophie, cringed. "The storm's right on top of us," Sophie said, assuming her usual role as the eldest. "Issa's afraid of thunder." "No, I'm not," the youngest protested through sobs, contradicting herself completely. "Rosie's afraid," she corrected, clutching her doll tightly to her chest. "Not me." "I see," Owen replied seriously. "Lots of people are afraid of storms, even grown-ups sometimes." "Are you?" Bella asked, looking at him skeptically. "Sometimes I get a bit nervous," he admitted, "especially when I'm by myself." The 4 girls stared at him in the semi-darkness, their little faces pale in the flashlight's beam. Come on, he decided. I'll get more flashlights and we can do something fun while we wait for the power. Like what? Luma asked, her curiosity momentarily overshadowing her fear. How about a blanket fort in the living room? With flashlights inside, it feels magical. The idea seemed to appeal to them, but another deafening thunderclap, followed by a bright flash of lightning through the windows, made Issa cling to Owen's leg. Or, he suggested, seeing the panic in the youngest's eyes, we can all sleep together tonight. What do you think? In your room? Bella asked, surprised. Yes. My bed is big enough for everyone, and we can tell stories until the storm passes. The suggestion was met with enthusiastic nods. None of them had ever been in Owen's room before. It was unexplored territory, an adult sanctuary now open to them. Can I bring Rosie? Issa asked in a small voice. Of course. All dolls are invited, Owen replied, echoing the phrase that had become a sort of code among them. Single file, with Owen leading the way by flashlight, they headed toward the end of the hallway, where the master suite was located. The storm raged outside, rain now lashing furiously at the windows, but inside, this small procession moved with determination. Owen's bedroom was spacious and minimalist, a king-size bed, neutral walls, few furnishings beyond the essentials, no photographs or personal decorations. It was a room that reflected the solitary life he'd led before meeting the girls. Wow, your bed is huge, Bella commented, rushing to climb on it immediately. Careful not to fall, Owen cautioned, lighting a few candles he kept on the bedside table. The warm glow created a cozy atmosphere, casting dancing shadows on the walls. While the girls settled in, Owen grabbed extra blankets from the closet. Who wants a story? He offered, sitting on the edge of the bed. I do, Issa said, still clutching her doll but calmer now. What kind of story? A story from when you were little, Sophie suggested. Owen rarely spoke about his past, and the girls were increasingly curious. He hesitated, thinking of something suitable. Okay, I'll tell you about the first time I ever saw snow. The four nestled closer, forming a half-circle around him. Outside, the storm still rumbled, but here in the candlelight, they created their own little universe. Owen recounted his amazement at the first falling flakes, how he ran outside without the proper coat, the cold sensation on his hands. It was a happy memory, one of the few from his turbulent childhood that didn't hurt to recall. After the first story, there was another and another. The girls also shared their memories, snippets of life before the accident that took their parents, treasured moments of joy they clung to. Gradually, their eyelids grew heavy. Issa was the first to fall asleep, curled up like a kitten between Owen and Sophie. Bella was next, mid-sentence about a dog they used to have. Luma held out a bit longer, but soon gave in to exhaustion as well. Sophie, as always, was last. She stayed awake deliberately, as though standing guard. They're safe, Sophie, Owen said softly. You can rest, too. She nodded, but her dark eyes remained on him. Thanks for letting us sleep here, she said formally. No problem. Actually, I think I like having the company. Did you always sleep alone? She asked, genuinely curious. Yes, for many years. Weren't you scared? Owen smiled, touched by her concern. Sometimes, he admitted. Everyone gets scared sometimes. Sophie considered that for a moment, her eyes already half closed with sleep. Good night, Owen, she mumbled finally, letting herself relax. Good night, Sophie. In minutes, she too was sleeping deeply. Owen remained seated, gazing at the four small figures scattered across his bed, each in her own unique position. Sophie stretched out straight, Luma curled into a ball, Bela sprawled on her stomach, arms wide, Issa tucked up like a baby. Carefully, so as not to wake them, he slid in among them. Instantly, as if sensing his presence even in sleep, the girls shifted slightly toward him. Issa clutched his shirt with her tiny hand. Luma rested her head on his arm. Bella slung a leg over him. And Sophie, though sleeping, seemed to relax a bit more. The storm raged on outside, but in that room, Owen felt a peace he had never known. Looking at those 4 sleeping children, he reflected on everything they had been through, the trauma of losing their parents, running away from the shelter, surviving on the streets, living in constant fear. Yet here they were, trusting him enough to fall asleep in his arms. In the darkness, lit only by the faint glow of candles, Owen whispered words he would never say by daylight. "I was scared, too, for so long, and you healed me." The girls didn't hear. They were lost in dreams, but he needed to say it out loud, to acknowledge the truth that had transformed his life. Those 4 little hearts beating beside his had reignited something he thought was gone forever, the ability to love unconditionally, to belong to someone, to be family. The storm finally began to move on, its thunder now distant and muffled. Owen closed his eyes, surrounded by the warmth and trust of the 4 girls fate had placed in his path. For the first time in decades, he was no longer alone in the dark. The day before the final hearing dawned with golden light shining on the mansion where, nearly 3 months earlier, 4 small lives had become intertwined with Owen's. The date that would decide everything had finally arrived. Tomorrow, the judge would announce whether the adoption would be granted or not. Owen had barely slept. He'd spent the night going through documents with Jeff, his lawyer, preparing answers for every possible question. Everything had to be perfect. Social worker Diane would make a final visit today, a final evaluation that could heavily influence the judge's decision. "Are the girls ready?" he asked Helena when she arrived at 8 a.m. here as usual. "Sophie was helping the others pick out clothes when I went upstairs," Helena replied, hanging her coat. "They seemed calm, considering." Owen nodded, grateful for the 1,000th time to have Helena around. She had become not just the girls' caregiver, but an essential ally, someone who truly understood what was at stake. "I'll go talk to them," he said, heading up the stairs. The upper hallway was quiet, which was unusual at this hour. Normally, even with the door closed, he'd hear their voices, laughter, or the occasional argument over a doll or toy. He tapped gently on Sophie's bedroom door, where the girls usually gathered in the morning. "Girls, are you awake?" No answer. He knocked again, a bit more firmly. "Sophie? Luma? You in there?" Silence. A sense of unease blossomed in his chest. He opened the door slowly. The room was empty. Sophie's bed was made, a habit she'd adopted meticulously every morning. "Like a grown-up," as she explained. "Bela, Issa," he called, stepping into the adjacent bathroom. Also empty. Owen checked the other bedrooms, one by one, his heart racing with each door he opened to find another empty space. Downstairs, Helena was already checking the pantry and closets, places where small children might hide if they were playing. "They're not down here," she reported, her normally calm face now tense. "Their backpacks," Owen realized suddenly. "Check if their backpacks are in their rooms." Each girl had a small, brightly colored backpack, gifts from Owen that had elicited emotional smiles when he brought them home. Purple for Sophie, blue for Luma, yellow for Bela, pink for Issa. Helena ran back upstairs while Owen searched the yard, the basement, every corner of the property, calling for them with growing panic. Minutes later, Helena returned, pale. "The backpacks are gone, and so are the dolls." Owen felt the blood drain from his face. They had left on their own. 4 small children, the oldest only 6, out there somewhere in the huge, dangerous city. "We have to call the police," he said, already picking up the phone. "Wait," Helena stopped him, holding out a piece of paper. "I found this in Sophie's room on the bed." It was a large sheet of drawing paper, folded in half. On the front, in colorful, uneven letters, it read, "For Owen." He opened it with shaking hands. Inside there was a drawing, the 4 girls holding hands, walking away from a larger figure obviously meant to be Owen. Red hearts floated between them. Below, written in big and small letters, some reversed, was a message in a childish scrawl. "We are leaving before they take us from you. We love you. Sorry." In the lower corner, each had signed her name as best she could. Sophie in careful print, Luma in wavy letters, Bela with a big B followed by small letters, and Issa with just an I and a series of circles representing the rest of her name. Owen felt the floor vanish beneath him. He sank into the nearest chair, the paper trembling in his hands. "They ran away," he murmured. "They left so they wouldn't be taken." Helena read over his shoulder, her expression softening despite her worry. "They're trying to protect you," she said gently, "in their own way." Owen looked up, confused. "They think they're sparing you pain," Helena explained. "If they leave now on their own terms, you won't have to witness them being taken away." The childlike logic, so simple and so painfully misguided, hit Owen like a physical blow. They would rather leave him voluntarily than watch him suffer if they were forcibly removed. "We have to find them," he said, leaping to his feet, "before the social worker gets here. If she finds out they ran—" No need to finish the sentence. Both knew what it would mean for the adoption process. "Where do you think they'd go?" Helena asked, already grabbing her coat. Owen tried to think as the girls would. Where would 4 small children with no money or resources seek refuge? "The park," he said suddenly, the memory vivid. "The park I took them to last Sunday. 4 days ago, as a final happy outing before the tension of the final hearing, Owen had taken the girls to the city park. It had been a perfect day. Bright sun, blue sky, melting ice cream, and laughter echoing everywhere. The girls had gone on every piece of playground equipment, run across the grass, fed the ducks at the pond. A day of pure joy, like a suspended moment in time before the decision that might tear them apart. There was a big, colorful slide," Owen continued, already heading for the door. "Sophie said it was the prettiest place she'd ever seen." "I'll call the police while you check the park," Helena offered, but Owen shook his head. "No. If the police find them, they'll take them straight to CPS. We need to get to them first." He grabbed his car keys, mind racing over how long it would take 4 little kids to walk to the park. They must have left before dawn, so no one would see them. "The social worker arrives in 2 hours, Helena reminded him. "If they're not back by then, they will be," Owen insisted, with more conviction than he felt. "Call Jeff, explain the situation, ask him to delay her visit somehow if we're not back." The drive to the park, which had taken 20 relaxed minutes on Sunday, now felt interminable. Owen drove at the speed limit's edge, scanning every sidewalk, every corner, searching for 4 small silhouettes. The park was nearly empty at that hour of the morning. A few early joggers, 1 man walking his dog, a woman reading on a bench. No children. Owen parked and jumped out, heart pounding. The park was large and with playground areas, gardens, a small pond, and tree-lined paths. "Sophie," he called, his voice echoing. "Luma, Bella, Isa." No response except birdsong and rustling leaves. The playground was deserted, the swings swaying slightly in the breeze. Owen ran to the big, colorful slide that had been the girls' favorite. He circled it, looked up, crouched to check underneath. And there they were. Huddled under the slide's platform, all 4 of them lay sleeping in each other's arms, wrapped in thin jackets, using their colorful backpacks as pillows, clutching their dolls. For a moment, Owen couldn't move, paralyzed by relief and an overwhelming wave of emotion that stole his breath. They were safe. They were okay. Sophie was the first to open her eyes, her light sleep as the oldest sister always on alert. Seeing Owen, her face filled with a complex mix, relief, shame, determination, all at once. "You found us," she said simply. Her movement woke the others. Luma rubbed her sleepy eyes. Bella blinked in confusion, and Isa, still half asleep, pointed at Owen and murmured, "It's him." "What are you doing here?" Owen finally managed, his voice tight with emotion. "We left a note," Bella replied, as if that explained everything. "You can't just leave like that," he said, trying to keep his voice firm despite the tremor. "It's dangerous. You could have been hurt." "We just wanted to help," Luma explained, her big eyes serious and fixed on him. "If we're not there, you won't be sad when that lady takes us away." Owen felt as if something within him shattered and mended at the same time. The child's logic, so simple and deeply loving, left him speechless. He crouched until he was at their level, then did the only thing that felt possible. He opened his arms. No words were needed. Like a tiny wave, the 4 girls rushed into him, abandoning backpacks and dolls, seeking the embrace they'd been afraid would cause him pain. Owen held them, feeling their small bodies shaking, their messy hair, the smell of sleep and innocence. Tears streamed down his face, and he didn't care. "Don't ever do that again," he finally whispered, his voice choked. "Never leave without telling me. Please." "We only wanted," Isa began, but Owen shook his head. "I know, but that's not how it works. That's not how families work." The word family hung in the air, filled with hope and fear. "We wanted to stay with you," Sophie murmured, so low only Owen could hear. "Only you." Her simple words struck straight into his heart. Owen pulled back slightly, looking at the four faces before him. Sophie, burdened with too much worry for her age, Luma quietly intense, Bella brave in disguise, Isa honestly vulnerable. "I want to stay with you too," he replied, wiping a tear from Isa's cheek with his thumb. "More than anything in the world. But running away isn't the answer. It never is." "What if the judge says no?" Bella asked, giving voice to the fear haunting them all. "Then we keep fighting," Owen answered firmly, "together, like a family. Because that's what we are, no matter what any judge says." Sophie studied him with those eyes too old for her tiny face. "Promise you won't give up on us." "I promise, with all my heart." 6 small hands reached out for him in a gesture that had become symbolic between them, touching his heart to seal an important promise. Owen placed his hand over theirs, feeling the pulse of life, hope, and a future they didn't yet know they'd have, but one he'd fight for with all he had. "Let's go home," he said gently. "We have an important visitor today, remember?" The girls nodded, and Owen helped gather the backpacks and dolls. Isa insisted on being carried, her small body exhausted from the fear and the long walk. Owen hoisted her easily, settling her on his hip while extending a hand to the others. On the way to the car, Sophie walked beside him, unusually quiet. "What's wrong?" he asked, noticing her worried expression. "Are you really mad at us?" she asked, her lower lip trembling slightly. "I'm not mad," Owen answered honestly. "I was scared. There's a difference." "Scared?" Bella frowned. "But you're big." "Adults get scared too," he explained gently, "especially when it's about people we love." The word love came out naturally, without planning. The 4 girls looked up at him, their eyes suddenly bright. "You love us?" Luma asked, her voice barely more than a sigh. Owen stopped walking, looking at each of them. The desperate emptiness he felt finding their empty rooms, reading their note, imagining life without them. He already had his answer. "Yes," he said simply. "I love you. Very much." In the back seat of the car, the 4 girls piled in together, still exhausted from a sleepless night and the long walk to the park. Before Owen even started the engine, Isa had drifted off again, her head resting on Sophie's shoulder. While driving home, Owen called Helena. "I found them," he said, relief evident in his voice. "So they were at the park, exactly where I thought. We're heading back." "Thank God," Helena replied. "Jeff managed to delay the social worker's visit until after lunch. He told her you had to take the girls for a last-minute medical checkup." "Brilliant," Owen said, glancing in the rearview mirror at the 4 exhausted forms. "Tell him I owe him one." When he hung up, he realized Sophie was still awake, watching him with those alert eyes. "Will everything be okay?" she asked softly, so as not to wake her sisters. Owen hesitated. He wanted to promise it would, that tomorrow the judge would sign the papers and they'd be an official family. But he'd learned these children prized honesty above all. "I don't know," he admitted, "but no matter what happens tomorrow, you'll always be my girls, always." Sophie gave a solemn nod, as though concluding an official contract. Then, to Owen's surprise, she smiled, a rare, radiant smile that transformed her serious face. "We love you too," she said simply, before closing her eyes and finally letting herself rest. Owen drove in silence, his heart overflowing. That morning, he had experienced the deepest emptiness of his life upon thinking he'd lost them, an emptiness no amount of money, power, or success could have ever filled. And now, with 4 sleeping children in his back seat, he felt like the richest man on earth. The courthouse was quiet that Thursday morning. The courtroom, with its dark wooden panels and solemn flags, was intimidating by its very nature, a place where destinies were decided by people who often knew only fragments of the lives before them. Owen adjusted his tie for the 5th time in 10 minutes. Beside him, Jeff, his lawyer, meticulously organized documents, occasionally whispering words of encouragement. Across the room, Diane, the social worker, spoke quietly with her supervisor. Owen couldn't interpret their expressions. In the weeks since the girls' attempt to run away, the evaluations had intensified. More visits, more interviews, more reports. The girls had been examined by psychologists, interviewed individually, observed as a group. The house had been inspected repeatedly, every inch assessed for its suitability for young children. Owen had submitted to it all without protest. He took parenting classes for prospective adoptive parents, underwent psychological evaluations, answered deeply personal questions about his childhood, relationships, habits. He opened his life like a book for strangers to leaf through as they pleased. All for those 4 little girls waiting in a nearby room, under Helena's care, likely as anxious as he was. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Martin Foster," announced the bailiff. The side door opened, and a middle-aged man with graying hair and a stern expression entered, his black robe swaying as he walked to the raised bench. "You may be seated," he said, after taking his place, his deep voice echoing in the almost empty chamber. Owen obeyed, his legs trembling. He had faced corporate boards, ruthless investors, aggressive competitors, none of which had prepared him for the fear he felt now. "We are here for the final hearing in adoption case number 7843 regarding the permanent custody of Sophia, Luma, Isabella, and Isadora Martinez." The judge read from his folder. "Mr. Hayes, you are requesting the full adoption of all 4 minors, correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Owen replied, his voice steady despite his nerves. The judge adjusted his glasses, studying the documents before him. "I have here all the CPS reports, psychological evaluations, preliminary school records." He flipped through a few pages. "I also see the report on the minor's recent disappearance 3 weeks ago." Owen swallowed. That incident could be used against him. "I'd like to hear from Miss Foster, the representative from Child Protective Services," the judge continued. Diane stood, professional as ever in her grey suit. Over the past months, Owen had seen her as an adversary, a threat. Today she could be an ally or the final hammer to his hopes of a family. "Your Honor," she began, "the Hayes-Martinez case is unusual in many respects. The beginning was, to say the least, irregular. The minors were under state custody when Mr. Hayes found them and took them to his residence without notifying the proper authorities." The judge nodded, his expression unreadable. "Nevertheless," Diane continued, "after extensive observation and multiple evaluations, the department recognizes that the minors have found genuine stability and affection in Mr. Hayes's home. Psychological assessments indicate significant emotional progress in all 4 children since being under his care." Owen felt a flicker of hope. "Regarding the runaway incident," Diane went on, "our evaluation concludes that it was actually a sign of the strong bond formed between the children and Mr. Hayes. They ran not to escape him, but to spare him the pain they anticipated if they were taken away." The judge made some notes, his face still inscrutable. "Mr. Hayes," he finally said, looking directly at Owen, "I'd like to hear from you, not your lawyer, not your assistants. You. Why these 4 children specifically? Why now? You're a single man, no parenting experience, a demanding career. Why take on responsibility for 4 minors at once?" It was the question everyone had asked, in one form or another, over the last few months. The question for which he had prepared polished answers. But sitting there under the judge's scrutiny, all his rehearsed replies vanished. Owen took a deep breath and decided to speak the only thing that mattered, the truth. "Your Honor," he began, his voice softer than usual, "I grew up in foster care. I was moved 7 times before I turned 10. Always alone, always labeled hard to place, that, like in the reports I wasn't supposed to see, but did." The judge raised his eyebrows slightly, clearly not expecting this start. "When I found success in business, I thought I'd finally overcome all that. That money and status would fill the emptiness I carried since I was a kid, but they didn't. My house was a cold place, perfect and empty, just like me. Owen paused, surprised at his own honesty. Then one rainy night, I found 4 little girls sitting on a sidewalk, and when I asked why they were crying, the youngest said, "Nobody wants us." His voice caught slightly, but he continued, "Those words, Your Honor, it was like hearing my own heart speak. I took them home that night because, in that moment, they weren't just 4 unknown kids. It was as if, in some way, I was helping that scared little boy I used to be." The judge listened intently, not interrupting. "But something happened in the weeks that followed," Owen went on, a small smile forming at the memories. "They weren't just reflections of my past. They were Sophie, with her fierce protectiveness over her sisters, Luma, with her quiet observation and music, Bella, with her bravery and determination, Issa, with her innocence and endless questions." Owen looked directly at the judge, abandoning all pretenses. "I learned that love isn't about me, about what I can get. It's about them, about what I can give. I learned how to read stories using different voices for each character. I learned the names of all their dolls and why each name is important. I learned that Sophie needs reassurance 3 times before bed, that Luma plays the piano when she's anxious, that Bella only eats green vegetables if they're hidden in rice, and that Issa believes her shoes talk to each other when no one is looking." A soft ripple of laughter moved through the room. "So why these 4 specific girls? Because I love them. Not as symbols, not as projects, not as something to replace what I lost. I love them exactly as they are, with all the complications, all the challenges, all the unpredictable joy they've brought into my life." Owen felt tears welling up, but didn't hold them back. "As for the money, my career, I've learned the hard way that there are things money can't buy. It can't buy the moment Luma said, 'I smell like home.' It can't buy Bella's drawing of all of us holding hands. It can't buy Issa's impulsive hug when she's happy. It can't buy the slowly earned trust in Sophie's eyes." He paused for a moment, discreetly wiping away a tear. "Your Honor, I'm not asking to adopt these children because I need them or because I want to fix something in me. I'm asking because they need a permanent home where they're loved exactly as they are, and because, in these past months, I discovered I can be the father they deserve." A profound silence followed. Owen took a deep breath, feeling strangely light, as though he'd dropped a burden he'd carried for decades. The judge watched him for a long moment, then closed the folder before him. "In 30 years on this bench," he finally said, "I've learned to recognize sincerity when I see it." He paused. "I'd like to meet the girls now." Jeff York, the lawyer, signaled to the bailiff, who opened the side door. Helena entered with the 4 girls, who walked in a line, hand in hand, wearing their best dresses, hair carefully combed. Owen's eyes met theirs, and he smiled, trying to exude a confidence he didn't fully feel. They stopped before the judge, who left his bench to stand at their level. "Hello?" he greeted, his voice softer. "I'm Judge Foster." "Hello, Judge," they answered in unison, clearly rehearsed by Helena. "Do you know why you're here today?" Sophie took a step forward, fulfilling her usual role as spokesperson. "You're going to decide if we can stay with Owen forever." "And is that what you all want?" the judge asked, looking at each girl. "Yes," Sophie said promptly. "Very much," Bella added. "Please," Luma said, her small voice firm. Issa simply nodded emphatically, clutching her doll Rosie to her chest. The judge smiled and returned to his bench. He straightened his robe, picked up his pen and looked at the courtroom. Having reviewed all reports, testimonies, and evidence presented, as well as the clear wishes of the children involved, this court grants the full adoption of Sophia, Luma, Isabella, and Isadora Martinez to Mr. Owen Hayes. For a second, Owen couldn't process the words. Then the meaning hit him like a wave. They were his daughters, officially, legally, forever. The girls, who apparently understood before he did, exploded in cheers of joy. Issa jumped up and down. Bela clapped her hands. Luma grinned wider than he'd ever seen. And Sophie, his serious, restrained Sophie, covered her face with her hands, her little shoulders shaking with sobs of relief. Owen sprang to his feet and ran to them, dropping to his knees and opening his arms. The four hurled themselves onto him in a chaotic embrace, knocking him flat on the courtroom floor. There, lying on the formal floor of the courthouse with four children clinging to him like little koalas, Owen wept openly, without shame, without holding back. He cried for the boy he had been, the man he had become, and the daughters he now had. "I think we can proceed with the signing of documents," the judge remarked, a genuine smile softening his usually stern face. "Whenever you're ready, of course." Eventually, Owen got to his feet. The girls still latched onto him however they could, Issa in his arms, Bella hanging off his neck, Luma and Sophie each clutching one of his hands. He signed the documents that way, Issa still on his hip, his free hand trembling with emotion as his signature transformed four lost children and one solitary man into an official family. "Congratulations, Mr. Hayes," the judge said, shaking his hand. "Or should I say, the Hayes-Martinez family." Outside the courtroom, Helena waited with colorful balloons for each of the girls. Jeff, the lawyer who was usually so formal, gave out hugs and handshakes like confetti. "Are we going home now?" Issa asked, still in Owen's arms. "Yes," he replied, feeling a whole new meaning to the word home. "We're going home." Sophie, always practical even in emotional moments, looked at him with still watery eyes but a determined air. "Now we can paint our rooms, right? You promised that when it was forever we could paint." Owen laughed, a light, free laugh that still felt new on his lips. "Yes, now you can paint, decorate, change anything you want." And that was exactly what they did. In the weeks that followed, the once cold and elegant mansion transformed completely. Sophie's room was painted sky blue and filled with books. Luma's was done in a soft green, with a special area for her little piano. Bella chose a vibrant yellow that, according to her, but felt like sunshine. And Issa, of course, who wanted pink, such a bright pink that it was almost overwhelming, but it made her smile whenever she walked in. The house, once an architectural showcase, became a lively chaos. There were drawings on the walls, little shoes in the hallway, half-eaten snacks abandoned in random spots. The sounds of laughter, arguments, piano music, bedtime stories, all echoed in halls that had once been so silent. One Sunday afternoon, 2 months after the official adoption, Owen watched his daughters playing in the yard. Sitting on the porch steps with a cup of coffee forgotten at his side, he marveled at the miracle of his new life. Helena came up and sat next to him. "A penny for your thoughts," she said softly. Owen smiled, eyes still on the girls. "I was thinking how funny it is. I spent my entire life building something, companies, skyscrapers, fortunes. I thought they would be my greatest achievements." He paused, watching Isa fall down and Sophie rush to help her. "But in the end, my greatest achievement was learning to love 4 little people, to be a family." Helena nodded, a calm wisdom in her gaze. "Some lessons cost more than money," she remarked. "Yes," Owen agreed, standing up when Bella called him over to see something important. "And those are exactly the ones worth every penny." 2 years had passed since the official adoption. The once impeccable mansion was now full of stories in every corner, walls displaying children's drawings, couches with juice stains, toys forgotten under cushions. The architectural perfection had given way to the perfection of family chaos, the kind of mess that means life. In the mornings, the upstairs hallway echoed with arguments about who got the bathroom first and accusations about borrowed clothes. "Dad, Bela took my shirt again." Luma's voice, now 9, rang out in indignation. "I did not." "It's the same as mine," retorted Bella, now 8. Owen, who used to wake precisely at 5:30 a.m. for solitary exercise, now rose to the sound of these little morning conflicts. He left his room already dressed for work, ready for another session of mediation among his daughters. "Bella, give your sister her shirt back. Luma, loan her the green one today, and we'll buy more clothes this weekend, okay?" In the kitchen, Sophie, now 10, helped Helena prepare lunchboxes. Her small but capable hands assembled sandwiches, cut fruit, and separated snacks. "Dad, Isa doesn't want a sandwich today," Sophie reported. always tuned into her sister's needs. She wants the juice boxes and snack packs like her friends. Isa, now 7, walked in, missing her front teeth, dragging her pink unicorn backpack behind her. "Dad, can you braid my hair today? We're having class pictures." Owen put down his coffee cup. Braiding hair had been one of the hardest skills to master in his new role. He'd watched dozens of online tutorials, practiced on dolls, until he achieved acceptable results. "Sure, princess, come here." With fingers now surprisingly dexterous for a man who once only signed contracts, he braided Isa's dark hair, securing it with the unicorn elastic she insisted on wearing daily. "It's perfect. You're the best hair braider in the world." "Braider isn't a word," Luma, ever the academic one, corrected. "It is now. I invented it," Isa replied with the irrefutable logic of a 7-year-old. By 7:45 a.m., as on every school morning. The 4 lined up at the front doors, backpacks on E, lunches in hand, waiting for Owen's final check before piling into the van that took them to school. This was the moment Owen secretly cherished most each morning. 4 faces turned toward him, 4 smiles, 1 missing front teeth, 4 versions of the same happiness that had changed his life completely. "Everyone got homework?" he asked, following the daily ritual. "Yes," they answered in chorus, raising their backpacks as proof. Books, supplies, permission slips. Each item was confirmed with enthusiastic nods. Owen knew something would be forgotten. Something always was, and he'd get a call from the school before noon. But that too had become part of the routine, part of the daily dance of being the father of 4. Before opening the door, he knelt down to their level for the final E, most important part of the ritual. "And most importantly, you're taking—" "Love!" they shouted together, jumping on him for a group hug that usually knocked him down. "I love you," he said, looking into each pair of eyes. "Have a great day. Learn a lot. Be kind." "We love you too, Dad," they replied, completing the ritual. In the car, after dropping them off at school, Owen often found himself smiling at nothing. If someone had told him 3 years ago that his greatest joy would be doing braids, packing lunchboxes, and settling shirt disputes, he would have thought it absurd. Now he couldn't imagine any greater happiness. Throughout the day, his phone rang constantly. The school nurse reporting Isa had a sore throat, Bella's teacher requesting permission for a project, Sophie reminding him about choir rehearsal, Helena mentioning Luma needed extra materials for an assignment. The life that once revolved around business meetings, acquisitions, and profits now orbited around 4 little sons. And he wouldn't trade it for anything. On the exact date marking 2 years since the official adoption, Owen left work early. He'd planned a surprise for the girls, tickets to a musical and dinner at their favorite restaurant. When he opened the front door, though, he was met with unusual silence. Normally, at this hour, the house would be alive with music, laughter, or sometimes tears, the sounds of life. "Girls?" he called, puzzled by the quiet. "Helena?" He walked into the living room and stopped in astonishment. The room was decorated with colorful balloons, paper streamers, and a huge handmade banner covering almost the entire wall. "Happy Family Anniversary Day, you're the best dad in the world." Below, each one had written personal messages. Sophie's, impeccably neat. "Thank you for always believing in us." Luma's, decorated with musical notes. "You're the best part of our song." Bella's, filled with colorful hearts. "Our dad by heart, forever." And Isa's, in childlike scrawl, "I love you more than unicorns, and that's a lot." "Surprise!" 4 voices shouted, leaping out from behind the sofa, the curtains, and, in Isa's case, a box obviously too small to hide her. Helena emerged from the kitchen carrying a homemade cake decorated with what appeared to be the girls' attempt to replicate Owen's face in chocolate frosting. "They planned it all themselves," Helena said, smiling. "They've been working on it for weeks." Owen was speechless. He'd spent his life surprising others with expensive gifts, grand gestures. Being on the receiving end of so much carefully planned love was overwhelming. "Do you like it, Dad?" Sophie asked, rare uncertainty in her usually confident voice. "Do I like it?" he managed at last. I've never gotten anything so special in my entire life." The four girls rushed in for a group hug, and he knelt to receive them, feeling that now familiar tangle of arms and hair. "We made presents too," Bella declared, unable to contain her excitement. One by one they gave him their gifts, wrapped in colorful paper and lots of tape. From Sophie, a hand-painted tie adorned with tiny fingerprints. From Luma, a playlist on a decorated CD. From Bella, a popsicle stick picture frame. From Isa, a macaroni necklace she insisted he put on immediately. "There's one more gift," Sophie announced. "It's from all of us." She handed him a large book covered in brightly colored fabric. On the cover, in carefully applied gold letters, "Our Family Story." Owen opened the album with trembling hands. Inside were photos, notes, drawings, and memories from the last 2 years. The first page showed a recreation of that rainy night, with a caption in Sophie's handwriting, "The day we found each other." As he turned the pages, their entire journey unfolded. First Christmas together, birthdays, beach trips, everyday moments made extraordinary by simply being together. On the final page, a recent photo of the 5 of them, smiling at a picnic. Below, in adult handwriting but signed by the 4, "To the best dad in the world, who showed us that family isn't who you're born with, but who chooses to stay together forever." Isa, perched on his shoulder as she liked to do, leaned in and whispered in his ear, "You didn't save us, Dad. We found ourselves with you." Owen looked up, stunned at the depth of those words from the youngest. Helena smiled, shrugging as if to say, "She came up with it herself." Fighting tears, Owen hugged his daughters yet again. For the first time, he felt truly loved, not for something he'd achieved or bought, not for his wealth or success. He was loved simply for being who he'd chosen to be, a father. The hours that followed were filled with loud music, impromptu dancing, rowdy games, and endless laughter. The mansion that once hosted million-dollar negotiations now held something infinitely more valuable. Imperfect, noisy, and glorious days of messy love. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.